Yeah, and I know that it's too early for you, Jeff, to be on the source. So it's so I know it's not that, even though it is Friday.
How do you know? How do you know?
Hello and welcome to the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast, a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network. Hope you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. It's Saturday the 7th of February. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rock star, but I am a full-time B2B CMO and now managing partner at Velocity B. And on this weekly show, with the help of my marketing chums, we share the marketing street knowledge to inspire your inner rockstar CMO. This week, Jeff Clark is back from holiday to quiz me about one of our 5 marketing fundamentals, the story. And sticking with content, I join Robert Rose in our virtual bar for a cocktail and a chat about what he'd do if he were starting a content marketing program today. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word. We'll be right back.
Hello, Ian. Great to have you in the rock and roll studio.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you doing?
I should have said rock and roll CMO studio. I just left out 3 letters. Sorry about that.
I know. It's all right. You've been away, so you've forgotten where you are.
Yeah, really? Where am I?
Yeah. You're in the Rockstar CMO studio, Jeff.
Oh, awesome. Good thing the heat's on because it's cold outside.
How was your holiday?
Holiday was great. Yes. A week in the Caribbean and returning to 2 feet of snow was, I just can't imagine a better outcome.
Yeah. Didn't you have to dig your car out when you arrived back?
Had to dig the car out at the airport, had to dig had to dig out the driveway to get the car in,
Oh my God. Oh my God.
It kept us warm though, It's like we weren't worried about the temperature because we were overheating from digging.
And the snow's remained since you can't, is it still?
It has. I skied yesterday, as a matter of fact.
God.
It was,
You skied?
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you do cross-country skiing, don't you, up there?
Yeah, so
Nice.
went to a local golf course and got a couple hours of skiing in.
Nice. Very nice.
How are things? Have things brightened up in your part of the world?
No. We had I think we had a bright day on Wednesday. As we record this, it's been raining pretty much all day. I managed to sneak out with a quick walk and then got frightened. Did a couple of miles and then got frightened back into the house. So it's like, it's quite depressing. We've had a lot of rain actually this we're now in February. Right? This January, It's our Sodden Isle has certainly lived up to that name.
I think you guys have progressed beyond thatched roofs, and mud huts. Yeah,
just about.
Yeah. Well, so we got to get on to our topic because today I get to turn the turntables on you, Ian, and extract some of your wisdom regarding one of our 5 fundamentals, our effing fundamentals of marketing, which we call the story. And so we're going to delve into it for perspective, which, we started a couple weeks ago with the 5 fails of the 5 fails of a broken machine being marketing ops. So this time we're going to do the 5 fails of a fractured story. And, the story, the machine, those are parts of our fundamentals along with the master plan, the knowledge, and the campaign. And so now we turn it over to you for the story. What do you say?
Thank you very much, mate. Well, I always get the story whenever we do the 5 fundamentals, don't I?
You're the story man.
I do love content marketing. And normally also, I just realized we normally use it to promote our little 5 fundamentals ebook, which you can find on our website, rockstarcmo.com. And it's under the tab long plays because why would we do anything obvious like put it under resources or something like that?
But you can download it for free.
Yes, no gate.
My God.
Or nothing. Yeah. Anyway, so it's great to be in the hot seat for a change. But now I've realized that how much work has to be done in the hot seat, I might not do that so often. So thank you. Mind you, you were on holiday, so somebody had to do some of the work, right? So
That's right.
All right. Well, I've been looking at a lot of B2B websites recently for clients, both theirs and their competitors. And I keep seeing the same old trope, and I've written about this as well. This focus on features, functions, and benefits developed from an inside out mindset. It's the old thing. We've been talking about it for a long time, right? When, of course, we all know that the customer cares about themselves and their problem, not our products. So there's obviously a disconnect here. And I think that disconnect can be driven by a passionate founder who believes the features would change the world. But sometimes I think we take this approach as marketers because we get handed a set of product features and then have to backfill the benefits for the features, build a story around them, and then the whole thing resonates, right? I'm sure that, Jeff, you've been in that situation in the past, right?
Yep.
Here are the features, go market them.
Yep.
But obviously our preferred approach is start with the ideal customer, the buyer, their needs, understand where this thing fits in the world, not how it fits into ours, and then build out the story. So, and if you don't do that, and as it fits our editorial guidelines, we have 5 effing fails.
Excellent. And I think the thing is that, behavioral science tells us that people learn best through stories. So the context of a story gives our brains the ability to process and remember all the facts, the features, the impression of who's telling the story. So not only is the story helpful for getting your features and benefits across, but landing that positive brand impression with the buyer. So with that as a excellent setup, Ian, what is your first failure if we don't get our story straight?
Well, I've thought, I went for a kind of a range of these 5, and some of them are like business outcomes, and some of them are the sorts of things you're going to experience internally. And if we don't get our story right, the first thing, or one of the things that will happen, is that sales stops trusting marketing and kind of quietly builds their workaround. So when the story doesn't reflect the real buyer conversations those guys are having, the sales team will stop using it. And they rewrite their own decks, they tell their own version of the story, they treat marketing assets as optional, which of course creates this fractured messaging in the market, right? So, and it slows down deals as it kind of unravels any of the sales enablement you might have done, and it erodes trust across the revenue team. And of course, when we talk about the revenue team or the revenue department, we're talking about sales and marketing, BD, all of the different teams that might be touching this stuff. And I think some of that is symptomatic of the fact that it's all very well when we marketers get together in a conference room and come up with all this fancy business speak and that, but and it's aimed at an aspirational buyer that we've invented. But when somebody, i.e. sales, have to stand up in front of another human being and say those things, they want to do that without feeling like a bit of a cock. It's got to be honest for them. It's got, they don't want to be embarrassed by whatever it is they're supposed to be saying. So the answer to this, of course, is it's about doing the knowledge, understanding the ICP and the buyer's needs, but also working with sales to understand the market's language to express those needs. So I think that's the loop, isn't it? We've got to engage sales when we're developing this messaging. What do you think, Jeff?
I've seen this a lot, and there's I always think in my experiences where there's always a sales rep who says he knows how to tell the story better than marketing does, or better than the rest of his own sales team. But if you lose, so it's one thing to have somebody who's out there on their own being a cowboy, but if you lose the whole team, you're right. Marketing's reputation is shot. Customers get all kinds of stories that aren't cohesive, they're not coherent. So this not only requires, building the compelling story, working with sales to make sure that it's going to work with their customers, and then do the training to make sure that that story is easy to deliver, as well as being personalizable to the accounts. Because every account is going to be a little bit different. So you need to be able to have language that is, that accounts for that.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this actually when you were speaking there, Jeff, and I might have been a bit strong with this, because it's not like, I think what we need to provide the sales team with is like a Lego set, so they can build a story within a set of guardrails, because they do know their market, and each different salesperson has a different franchise, a different vertical, a different market, or a different area or something like that. So they do need to have that ability to customize it for themselves. And the best sales guys do that. But what our basic main message to that ICP needs to be consistent across all this, right? It's just an interpretation.
Yeah. Excellent. So we got to keep sales on board. So what is the number 2 trap that we could fall into?
Well, this next one is you become B2B beige, right? You're professional, but you're forgettable. So one time actually, as a new CMO, I once cut and pasted messaging, and I think I've probably talked about this on this podcast before, but I cut and pasted messaging from across our category into a slide, and I removed the product references and asked the leadership team to guess what was our content, what was our competitors' content, and they couldn't. So, if you haven't got a strong differentiated point of view, the story collapses into safe language and the sort of business mealy words that are used across the whole category, and then you there's no distinctiveness, there's no differentiation, and in the olden days, or I'd say olden days, like a few years ago, it used to be, you see this all the time, right? The marketing team Google their competitors whenever they get asked a question. It's like, well, what would Adobe do, or what would our big category leader do? And you end up doing this sort of category-wide cut and paste of everyone's generic blah, 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 blah. And if you can imagine that every single other vendor in your category is doing the same, then you've got this goldfish bowl of meh, right? And of course, today, that goldfish bowl of meh, or that average content, is being produced by the LLMs and ChatGPT. But they are great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use ChatGPT or the LLMs, but it's the prompt and how you guide them and give them that human spark that there's a bit of friction in there. And that's the point of view that we need to have, that kind of takes you out of this B2B beige, right? But the trouble is you don't want to offend anyone, but you don't stand out to anyone either if you slide into this beige. And you need to decide what you want to be known for. Otherwise, the market decides that you're just like the others, and your content without that point of view is just noise to them. They can't tell the difference. And the other thing about this not being able to tell the difference thing is important, is because the buyer's job is to buy. The buyer's job is to find distinction, and you're not helping them, right? And so there's no brand recall. And if you do if you're lucky enough to get into the shortlist, you're then competing on features and price, which I'll talk about in a minute, as a bad place to be. And especially as now, and we discuss this an awful lot on this podcast, you and me, Jeff, is the majority of your future buyers are not in market right now. So we'll refer to the 95-5 rule from LinkedIn, all that good stuff, which we'll dig into in a minute in one of my other fails. But how important it is to be distinct before the prospect meets you is so important.
Exactly. And I just, for listeners, I just want to state that beige, it's not that beige is a bad color, but it's best used to complement something that is more distinctive. So what is it that you've been talking about? What is it that you want to be to be distinctive about your company and its offerings? And what tone do you want to set? And not that marketing wants to be the coloring department, but words, graphics, brand colors. I mean, it's all part of delivering a story that's distinctive and memorable. So anyway, we got to work on our color palette. We got to keep sales engaged. What is, and when I mean color palette, I mean it in the broadest sense. Right. Yeah. And so, what's number 3 on your potential?
Number 3 kind of extends from what we were just talking about just a moment ago. So we have this sort of mental model of this sort of 95% of our audience are unknown to us, right? And the trouble is once sales gets to meet them, they have to re-educate the buyers far too late. It's by the time somebody actually engages with a vendor, they've pretty much made up their mind, right? Or they've made up their mind about a shortlist. They've made up their mind about the how to solve the problem. And we've discussed this before, as I was just mentioning, with the 95-5 rule from LinkedIn. And also the buying research that we've covered on this podcast from 6 Sense, that by the time sales engages, buyers, as I said, have already framed the problem, formed their opinions, built a shortlist. And the mistake that we often see when features drive the narrative is that the only people who care about features are the 5%, right? Because they're already in market. They're now looking for product information, product detail, because you do need that information. But if you think about it, the 95% of your content is only really of interest to 5% of your audience. So that's a bit of a mismatch, right? The rest that might be not curious about your solution, the other 95%, are just not getting anything out of your content. And the reason why I think this is important, and I think you and I, when we talk about our revenue department and some of the other, some of our colleagues in this space. So, for example, Simon Daniels, who we often refer to, and his podcast, What's Broken in GTM and How to Fix It. They talk about the sales models. And I think what we're increasingly seeing, and this, I mean, even from, when I was in pre-sales, I did solution selling way back in the day. And the strategy for the sales guy was to re-engineer the vision of the buyer to bring them towards how this particular vendor viewed the problem. And you can't do that anymore. By the time they're talking to a sales guy, that vision is set. It's much, much harder for them to change it. So they've got it all figured out. And it's much harder for them to set that agenda. So we need to do it in marketing while they're sitting in this 95% of not known. So what do you think of that, Jeff?
Well, I think the other aspect is the brand impression that you're trying to set up. Again, with people who may not be in market, but they're going to be receiving signals. They're going to be seeing things that people within their business and ecosystem are discussing. And so, a good story about your company and its products will help give buyers a confidence in learning more from you when it's time for them to do that. So that's both in the early stages when you can help educate the buyers, and also in the late stages, because when other people who are involved in the buying group are coming in and sales is engaging with them, you've got that story's got to work from way up front, all the way to the end through the buying process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So now we're on to number 4 of the 5 freaking fails of a fractured story. What is number 4 on your list?
Is it freaking fails?
I was trying not to stumble.
All right. So number 4, again, it kind of builds on the previous 3. So you end up fighting on features, functions, and price, which is what I alluded to there. And I don't mean, when I say you, I mean the company, the sales guy, the salesperson. And so this is a bit of an extension of that. So as we've discussed before on this show, is that B2B buying is actually emotional. Buyers suffer from FOFU, which I've written about, which is fear of fucking up. And they're looking for connection, reassurance, and inspiration. It's not just about a feature function list and a very transactional thing, right? They're looking for that trust. And I think particularly to your point, which is why I didn't really chime in on what you were just saying, because I knew what was coming next, is particularly what you were saying there is that early stage, you're not, then to be considered, you want to be considered as a trusted partner that's going to help them, right? And that isn't at the feature function level necessarily. That's with your trust content about, the fact that you've done it before. And so B2B buyers may justify with logic, but they decide with emotion, risk reduction, confidence in you, and career safety, right? They're not going to get fired for doing this. And features alone, as I say, doesn't provide that kind of emotional connection. And if you don't win their hearts and minds, then assuming that you can overcome the love of their competitor that might have been formed in that sort of upstate. I don't know why I'm waving my hands about and creating these things, because it's an audio-only podcast. I don't know. I'm not very good in the hot seat.
We need to go video. We need to go on video.
Yeah, I'm not very good in the hot seat. But let's assume that we can overcome whatever emotional connection our competitors are set in that stage. Once we meet them, it's going to be about features, functions, and most of all price. And as you can't position the value of a premium price, because a premium price is more than features and functions, right? It's about that emotional view that somebody has of your brand. Then the only sales lever that So the only lever your sales team have is going to be price and discounts. Your margins collapse and you're in a race to the bottom, right? So it has a very significant effect. So yes, you need content about features because you're going to need them in that stage. It establishes you in the category. It's the default or hygiene content, but it can't be the only content. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, I was thinking about when I've been in a, in the buying process myself, bought a new market automation platform, new content management, and it's like, the all the messaging you hear early, helps you build that trust and confidence to make you open to listening to a certain set of vendors, the short list of vendors. But even as you're going through the short list, and you might say, "Oh, the pricing is a little too high," and they don't quite check off every feature we wanted. If you've really laid the groundwork well, you're going to get past some of those potential objections, or your, the good job your salespeople will do with objection handling will help get through that part of the process where you avoid the literal feature to feature bake off. You avoid the pricing pressures. You handle objections from gatekeepers. Gatekeepers, most of which are not, they're not super educated on this particular, content
category.
or this particular product to buy anyway. So, the more you can soften that up. I had a sales rep, or it was a sales manager, director that used called softening the beaches.
Yeah,
we need to make it so that we have a good landing and we can conquer the account. He was a little too militaristic, but it was
in the UK politics they call it rolling the pitch. So it's about preparing the cricket ground, I think, is where it comes from. But yeah.
So now that we've been rolling the pitch on this topic, what is your fifth potential fail?
My fifth is about the fact that your content never compounds if it's treated as static, as a tactic. A tactic. Can't read my own notes. But and so this is something that this is like a greatest hits really of all the things we've talked about, really, because this is a bit like when we talk about brand, right? It's the long and short of it. And if the content team finds themselves on a hamster wheel, responding to orders for the business as if they were working in a diner, they can't build a coherent story. They can't, build out on that. You're just, it's transactional the way you're building your content. And we find ourselves as a team confusing activity with strategy, become measured and satisfied with the number of deliverables that we do, so the number of things you do, rather than the outcomes. And it's always hard to measure a content team, and it sometimes ends up being about deliverables, but really you've got to hook it to your outcomes. And if you don't, we never stop to ask why. We just say, how much have we produced? How much do we need to produce? What is this thing? And the other thing is, if you don't focus on outcomes, and again, we talked about this in terms of the master plan, right? And where this fits in with, and I talk about awareness, revenue, and trust, or some kind of framework of measurement that you want to have for this, rather than how many bloody doohickeys you produce this week, is that we can't have the patience to see a campaign through, right? It's just we're creating assets, and this then combines with our marketing sort of magpie tendency of loving everything that's shiny and new, and all the ideas that come into the team via the CEO's 17-year-old nephew, and we confuse the market with inconsistent messaging and never putting enough wood behind any of our arrows, right? So, this week we're going to be on tick face. I love saying tick face. But that's the idea from the CEO's 17-year-old nephew. We should start a tick face platform for you. Yeah. But if you do that, nothing lands. The content isn't valued. It's seen as a cost, not a growth investment, because we haven't hooked it up to an outcome and we haven't given it time to realize that outcome, right? And and the other point about content marketing sometimes is we think that we'll build it and they'll come, but of course a good content campaign needs to be treated like a product, and it needs to have a properly resourced and planned launch plan, right? So if you're going to go do a great piece of research, you're going to launch that you're going to need to think about that. Just chucking it out in the world isn't going to be good enough. What do you think?
Well, I think this is, your point about, having any particular piece of content be, just a tactic sitting on its own. It's so valid because, you think, as, stories have chapters, verses. And so each of your tactics, all of your campaigns have got to kind of fit into that broader story arc. If it doesn't, then, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to work. And certainly writers of novels and memoirs, talk about the story arc. So when you build your messaging and your brand architecture, you need to think about that story arc from the elevator pitches, unique value propositions, offering descriptions, research papers that back that up. The whole thing has got to fit in within that story arc. So I think that's, these are all important points, but I think that's a good one to land on.
Yeah, and I think, there was an article in the Washington Post that everybody kind of laughed at, but there seems to be a lot more talk about storytelling as a marketing skill required within brands and within businesses. So, yeah, that's a good way of putting it there, Jeff, about that story arc and that storytelling skill. Yeah.
So anyway, this has been great, and we now know what happens if we fail at developing an authentic, cohesive, compelling story. So sales stops trusting marketing because they go their own way. You become B2B beige. A lot of alliteration in this podcast. So it's professional, but perhaps forgettable. Sales has to re-educate the buyer late in the cycle, which is a waste of time. Your teams fight the feature and price war, which again is not a position you want to put them in. And also, last but not least, the content never compounds. So it's it's a lone tactic, not an element of a broader story arc. So this has been great. So any final thoughts you might have, Ian?
Yes, no, that was splendid. I like the way you summarized that. And I think that maybe we shouldn't be recording on a Friday because it seems that both of us our mouths seem to have stopped working properly with some of this alliteration, but yeah, absolutely. And
our brains are going too fast for our mouths.
Yeah, and I know that it's too early for you, Jeff, to be on the source. So it's so I know it's not that, even though it is Friday.
How do you know? How do you know?
But so I'm not sure about this turning the tables thing. It's a lot of work, but that's it. So
yeah. So in a few weeks, I'll be back. I'll be back in the hot seat, and
yes, and just to explain to listeners, it's not just all holiday with you, is it? You've got some other projects on the go. You're you're fighting the good fight for clean tech and
doing lots of irons and lots of fires. So, but always like this fire.
Well, we steer away from the politics here, but yeah, absolutely. So we'll see you, I think, in 2-3 weeks' time, and I think as we
have a topic
as we go to this new cadence with you, Jeff. So
yeah,
I'll see you then, mate.
Sounds great. See ya.
Cheers, buddy.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you, Jeff, and I'm sure you'll agree it's good to have him back, but we need to give him a bit of space for some other projects, and I recommend you follow him on LinkedIn to see what he's up to. And as part of the podcast format change, I'm going to go back to having a wider variety of guests, so I'm looking forward to introducing you to more of my chums. Right, time to wind down the week in the pub. The Rose and Rockstar, our virtual bar for a blend of marketing and mixology, with the chief troublemaker at Seventh Bear, Robert Rose, for a chat this week about what he would do if he was starting over today.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much, mate. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, things are good here. I'm just off the road for visiting a client in Salt Lake City, and
nice.
First client visit of the year, which went well.
Nice.
And first travel of the year, which went well and uneventful. So always two big pluses, right? so I'm ready for the weekend and ready for cocktails for sure.
Nice. And where are we going with a cocktail this week, mate? After your travels,
so we have this is this one I stole from my dad when I was young. He used to make this cocktail for himself on just about every Sunday evening. And he did not call it this because he would be highly offended if he heard the name of this. But my dad was a bit of a redneck. And I'm calling this the Redneck Bloody Mary. And it's really tasty. But it's really, you're about to see that it's really redneck. So you start with, do you have, I think it goes by a different brand in the UK, but we have here something called V8 juice. Do you know this?
Oh yeah. I'm aware of it. I'm not sure. We have a similar thing. It's like is it a spicy orange juice in the US? It's like a spicy
vegetable juice with a
that's it.
With a tomato base, basically.
Yeah.
And so they have many different flavors of it now, including they have a Bloody Mary mix. Which is not what I use, but under the V8 brand anyway. But they have varying degrees of, they've got one that's spicy, they've got one that's kind of fruit flavored. This is the original V8 vegetable juice, which is basically like a mild, salty tomato juice that has a bit of spice to it.
Yeah.
And so it's basically that and vodka. That's it. That's the two ingredients. You just basically take a glass, you fill it up as much as you want with the V8 juice and as much as you want with a vodka. Some Sundays require a little more vodka, some Sundays require a little more V8 juice, whatever you like. And basically I put, what I do is I do a celery salt around the rim of the glass.
Oh, nice.
So it's that. If you want to get fancy, you can add your Worcestershire sauce. You can add, pepper sauce. You can add, celery to it like you would, or even, the horseradish or anything else that you would put in a Bloody Mary. But honestly, to keep it redneck, I just keep it straight up V8 juice and vodka. That's all it is, and it's actually quite good. It's actually really nice. It reminds me as a kid, because my dad, when he would make it every Sunday night, I would get a sip of it, right? I would get just a sip of it as a kid, and it reminds me very much of Sundays in when I was growing up.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, here we have the saying that you're supposed to get your 5 a day, your 5 vegetable portions a day. So I think in that V8 juice, you're definitely getting your 5 a day. So
that's the way they used to advertise it here as well. They used to say, get your servings of vegetables in one drink. Right? That was the way that they advertised V8 in the original days. Now they actually do it as an energy drink. They actually market it like an energy drink. It's like crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I remember V8 when we were there, but we definitely have the equivalent here. If not, you're right. We would put all the Worcester sauce in it and all that. Well, I should try and say it your way. We say Worcester sauce. You say Worcester. You know the stuff.
Yeah.
But splendid. So we're sipping on these Redneck Bloody Marys, and so this week I have a question for you. So a couple of weeks. Well, some of this is based on. Actually, I already had this question in my notes, to be honest with you, before I heard this. But 2 weeks ago, you and Joe had a really interesting issue on your episode of your podcast, This Old Marketing. And as I've already described, this is the This Old Marketing After Party podcast now, as we mention your podcast so often. And you guys had a Q&A session that people sent in some questions. Ask me anything. Let me get my terminology right. You had an Ask Me Anything session. Yeah. And one of the interesting last question, which is very similar to the question I'd planned to ask you today, actually, was we talk a lot about the death of organics reach and how we can, reach our audience and build an audience organically these days. Social is moving to pay to play. We've talked about the future being communities and owned audiences. We talk about rented land, and we talk about newsletters and all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a shift going on in the way that we've discussed, and it's similar to the question you got asked in your podcast. So, what advice would you give to people that are starting down this content marketing path with a new idea, either for themselves or they're new into a business or they've got a new business and they're starting the shit from scratch? Is the old playbook thrown away? What do we do now?
Well, no, I think, the funny thing is that it kind of goes back to an older playbook, right? Which might even, you might even look back to the early the early aughts as it were, right? So even 2005, 2006 level of, just as maybe even later, slightly later than that, as social media started to come up. And what I find is that it is, there's sort of two aspects to it, right? Of what I would do if I were starting from scratch. And the first is to find your, I used to call it the Busker box. In other words, it's the platform that you can stand on that gives you more volume than you really have, than you really can on your own, or that you without it, right? And so the first thing to do is, as you start to, so the very first thing to do is to find out what it is, your story you want to tell, right? So I'm assuming basically there's someone who feels like, oh, I have a thing to tell and I want to have a point of view on the world, on whatever it is that I'm trying to make my business, right? Whether that's as a consultant, whether that's as a new business or software company or a hardware company or, pet store, or whatever it is, you have some passionate thing that you want to talk about and tell the world and make successful. And so I'm going to assume that step's already done, right? And that what we're really talking about here is, how do I market that? How do I get that known? How do I become known for that? And so, because we could have a whole other discussion about how to develop a product these days, but let's assume that first part is done and that you're looking at making people aware. The first thing I would do is find your story that you want to tell, and I would build that center of gravity. And when I say about that center of gravity, it's the gravity well where you want to put your audience, right? Where you want to build relationships. So that for you might be a website plus a Substack. It might be some other email newsletter. It might be a podcast. It's probably not a podcast, but it might also be a e-commerce site. It might be some functional web application. It might be an app. It's somewhere where you're basically collecting people into a addressable room where you can start to develop relationships with those people, because that's the most important part of this, is starting to build the relationships with a community that you are starting to build. And I use the word community more than audience, because these days it really is about the relationship versus the old days, which it was about just building numbers and audience and engagement. Those days are over, right? In other words, building an audience, a huge audience on TikTok, or building a big follower base on X, or building a big follower base on LinkedIn is not going to give you any value. You'll have much more value out of 100 people in your community versus 1,000 people that are following you on social media. Now, that's not to say that 1,000 people on social media is an important part of that, because it is the river that you start to flow into that center of gravity. So that's the first thing. Build that center of gravity. Then step 2 is to find that Busker box. Find that, you're going to go out and you're going to be loud, and you need to be louder in the marketplace of ideas than your competition, than other things that are competing for your audience's or your community's attention. And so you need to go find that, whatever that thing is. It might be an existing brand where you can go participate in that community at first and then start to lead that community. It might be a place where you can, events that you would attend, that you can actually start to become an influencer in those events, or that you can become sort of the bridge of all of those events. It might be, it might be a community of thought leaders in your space where you start out as sort of a participant and then end up being a voice of those leaders. What you want to do is find enough of your sort of, birds of a feather, if you will, where you can start to become known within a known community for being a leader of whatever idea whatever story you're going to tell. It is extending your content and your leadership known ability to those external platforms, and hopefully drawing them back into building relationships with them in whatever function whatever that sort of sphere of influence is. And doing those first 2, or if you might look at it as 3 steps, right?
Yeah.
Are the first 3 steps that I would do. And then we can talk about sort of, okay, what are the tactical applications of that? Doubling down on YouTube and getting into your social media and all those kinds of things as an add-on to that. But those are the first 2 or 3 steps I'd take.
Yeah. And I think when you were chatting on your podcast, you were talking a lot about adding value to other people's networks so you get invited in. Was my takeaway from what you were talking about as well,
that's
right?
Exactly. That's what I mean by getting into that birds of a feather idea. Is that building those relationships and stitching those communities. So you need to show up in those networks. You need to show up with value in those networks. And you need to start to surface yourself as, so much of us, a lot of this, you have to sort of get over your, the sort of imposter syndrome, which can often come into play here. Whereas, you're going to go in those things and you spend too much time sort of being a wallflower in those without offering an opinion, right? So the other thing that this sort of assumes is that you do know your shit, right? In other words, you're the product you're launching, the point of view you have on the marketplace, you've done that work. You've done that work where you're not, you see this all the time now with that person that you knew, let's call it 5 years ago, as a quote unquote expert in crypto. And now today they're an expert trying to lead the community in AI implementation. And you're like, really, dude? What? Really? So you've done, so you really need to do the work, basically.
Yeah. So you're building authority and credibility. But really, I guess my supplementary question just now was really about that generosity of giving value. It's not just about parking your tank or yourself on somebody else's lawn. It's about being generous to their community to the point you get invited in and then they start including you in stuff, right? Because that's exactly how it sounded.
That's exactly right. And in many ways it becomes, in the early days, about associating yourself with adding value to the extent that they start noticing you, basically. And I use the example all the time. This was my strategy in the early days of content marketing. When I went and hung up my own shingle, the first thing I did was go build attention for Joe Polizzi and what he was doing at Content Marketing Institute. And by sheer blast radius, I started to get noticed as well. And so that was the idea. In other words, by recognizing good and basically praising good and highlighting good, you become associated with good. Therefore, you can start claiming and demanding some of the authority in that space.
Yeah. I think nowadays, because you see it a lot on LinkedIn and stuff, is I think what you also need to really avoid is looking like you're playing the playbook. Right, because you see this on LinkedIn all the time, don't you? You get somebody you don't know likes a thing, does a thing, bams you on the in-mail, and then tries to sell you something, right? All within a few days. You need to be genuinely leaning into helping, right? If somebody gets a whiff that you're playing them and it's a playbook you're doing, then you're going to turn that right off, aren't you?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you'll turn. People sniff through that. That's what's really changed in 2026 versus where we were in 2010 or 2015. Is that audiences, especially younger audiences, are much more savvy to that now. And we all know. You understand when you're being sold versus when you're being where there's true differentiating value. And by the way, differentiating value doesn't mean sort of repeating what ChatGPT just said, right? It means you have to find your unique voice in the marketplace, which in an depending on what it is you do, I'll put it this way, forever, you would look at somebody like Marcus Sheridan, who was out there saying, basically, all you need to do is answer all the questions that your audience has, right? You become the resource for all the FAQs that your audience has around those things, and you're transparent and you add value in that way. And it's like, well, that's fine advice in 2010 and 2012 when that stuff wasn't out there. But now, unless you're selling some unknown, unheretofore, sort of heard of widget, if you're out there selling financial services or real estate services or pets or marketing services or anything, the questions are answered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are no more FAQs to answer. They're all answered.
Yeah.
And so your best bet is not to try and find more pat answers to the frequently asked questions. You need to be, looking to answer the unanswered, infrequently asked questions.
Yeah. Well, there's, two things come to mind on that one. The first one is, I think it does depend on the audience as well as the thing that you're flogging, right? So it could be that you're in an industry where people aren't as online. They're not all on LinkedIn. They're not all in the goldfish bowl that we hang out in. And these sort of one-on-one type things are useful to them. And maybe they aren't going to type the questions into ChatGPT. So there is a little bit of that. And that's always a concern about where I have this thought sometimes when I'm writing things. I think, well, everybody fucking knows this, but not everybody does, because the people that know it are the people that I hang out with, like you, but not necessarily a prospective client knows this, right? So that's a hard balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you find that?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And these days it's even harder because what has happened is we've had so much, and I know it's not typically a politically correct word these days, but we've had so much tribalization in terms of the communities that people belong to, right?
Yeah.
And so your audience in increasing stratification, let's say, is going to be attracted to communities that you want to be part of, but are going to very much be different values within those communities. And I know that's a really esoteric way to say it, but it's basically the way you approach an audience in Reddit, let's say, for whatever topic you're looking to do, versus how you approach that same exact audience in LinkedIn, or how you approach them on YouTube, or how you message them in an email, or, all those kinds of things are so different. And you have to be aware of that and really understand the culture of the community you're trying to join and add value to, so that you don't come in and immediately put your foot in your mouth, right?
Yeah. It's like, like some of the things that we talk about in our little Martin Goldfish Bowl, like the 95-5 rule of LinkedIn. And you're having a conversation with somebody, you just drop it in and think, well, everybody knows that. And then you meet somebody, you're like, what's that? And you're like, oh yeah, no, this is the thing. And they go, oh, that's really interesting. And you realize that, so there are, even those tropes that, we try out all the time. It's knowing your audience, isn't it, of what does that. The other question,
that's in so many ways it's going to those basics, right? It's going back to
exactly, know your audience. The other quick thing, is, and this is definitely not a quick thing, so maybe I shouldn't be tossing this in, but that is these days when it's about growing community, showing value, and all that stuff. That is the individual, right? How do businesses present themselves in this new world in the same way? Because you can't follow that same motion, can you? If you're creating a brand LinkedIn page or a brand voice.
Well, the funny thing is that I actually cover that very topic in this week's rose-colored glasses. It kicks off. It's a beautiful segue to my new series that is happening in February on brand strategy in 2026. Yes.
See, this show isn't just the after party of this old marketing podcast and promoting that. It is also the talky version of your rose-colored glasses. This all fits together. It's amazing.
It's just all my very linear thinking is all that. Yeah.
Well, that seems to be a good time to ask you, fella, where can people find content like this that's always going to be useful? And
we've got our new little fun stuff on our website now, which we've turned into a bit of a magazine, if you will, at seventhbear.com, where I'm putting a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. A lot more content the last couple of months I've noticed cranking out there. Yeah, really good. And then when people spin the dial on the interwebs and they either want to listen to your great stuff about business, or they want to listen to your snarky comments about politics, where are they going to find you?
They're going to find me on LinkedIn for talking not about politics. They'll find me on YouTube, not talking about politics. And then certainly you'll find me on Threads talking about politics.
Splendid, mate. And for my selfish purposes, will you be in the bar next week?
Of course.
I look forward to it, mate. I'll see you. Thank you, Robert. I like the expression, find your Busker box. And clearly, while the algorithms and channels change, it's about people, relationships, and the network you build. And the expression I like from Seth Godin of finding your tribe. So that's a wrap on episode 308 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Hope you're still enjoying this longer weekly show. And thank you for putting your dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to me and my chums and the articles we discussed in the show notes, along with links to our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes at rockstarcmo.com. Next week, Kathy is my guest in the studio and Robert is back in the bar. In the meantime, a quote from Lisa Marie Presley for any content creator. I'm not doing this to be a pop star. I've had plenty of money and attention. I'm doing it for the credibility.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.